All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our University Business Web Seminar here today, which is entitled Leading Digital Transformation, Success Strategies from Higher Ed CIOs. Now, before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items, and then we'll get right to the presentation. Today, we will be welcoming any questions that you have today from the audience with a Q&A session, and that will be happening at the end of the presentation. You can submit a question at any time from now until the end by using the Ask Question module that is at the bottom of your screen. It's the red button with the question mark. There will also be some audience polls throughout the presentation today, and the polls, they appear as regular slides like in a PowerPoint presentation, and you can participate directly just by clicking directly on the slide once it appears. Also, there are some clickable and downloadable content that I'd like to direct your attention to. The related content module, or the blue icon with the paperclip, that includes a few assets related to today's topic, is there. Just click to visit the URL or to safely download the assets immediately. So look for that as well. You can also expect to receive an email from us at UB at some point tomorrow. And in that email, there will be a link to the on-demand video, as well as the slides. And lastly, and then we'll get right started, I encourage you all to stay on to the very end of the presentation to take our brief post-event webinar survey. And that will pop up immediately on your screen after I close out the session. Thank you. All right, and now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our moderator today, who will be leading today's discussion, and will introduce our panel of CIOs. Today's moderator is Joel Daemen, who is CEO of Kuali. Hi, Joel. Great to have you with us here today.
Howdy. Thanks for this opportunity. I just want to say thanks thank you for allowing us to have this conversation. It's going to be a fun one. So the fellow panelists are Kevin Davis, who is the CIO of Davidson College, Melaine Kenyon, who is the Vice President CIO at Daemen University, and Garrett Yoshimi, who is VP for Information Technology and the CIO at University of Hawaii. Each one of them is going to introduce themselves. So we'll just click the slides and let you each introduce yourselves, and then we're going to have a fun conversation. Next slide. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Joel. Great to see everyone here today. My name is Kevin Davis. I'm the CIO at Davidson College. I've been here for a little over 6 years now, and most of this as CIO. And happy to tell a little bit of the story of our experience powering digital transformation through smart forms and low-code and no-code development. We had a number of drivers that took us here. One was just the number of paper forms around campus. It seemed like if you went to our website, which is a beautiful new website a few years ago, anything you wanted to do to interact with the campus was a different looking PDF that you would download and mail to somewhere on campus or fax to somewhere on campus. That's just not a modern way of working. And as we were near end of life for a lot of campus systems like our document management system and our ERP and our SIS, we really needed a new way to be able to have students, faculty, staff, and the community interact with our systems in our offices. We had started about 10 years before we discovered Quality Build with hiring a dedicated .NET developer to build micro apps in Windows. And what we found was they just were too limited in capability. And there was also this challenge of sort of having to pick up the telephone or sending an email every time you wanted to make a change. So it really wasn't a great platform where we didn't just want to transform paper to digital, we wanted to transfer old digital to new digital. So we were looking for a platform to replace these legacy apps and the paper forms. We also really needed to find a way to interact with sources of data from around campus. This was a key differentiator as we looked at products to help us in this space. We had invested in an integration platform as a service, which gave us great ability to make API-driven connections and pull data from other systems. So if you have a smart form, for instance, making a change in your class schedule, you'd like when you logged in for the system to know what your classes are. Being able to do things that don't just make folks type data for the sake of typing data, but actually use systems of record and points of truth to pre-populate. We also ended up building a campus API modeled on the BYU campus API that allows us to pull a lot of detail together. And we love the fact that with Build, we could both give folks access to all of these APIs, or depending upon their department and for security reasons, sometimes only give them certain access to help provide more role-based control. And third, it really helped empower citizen developers across campus. I think a lot of us have talked for years about citizen developers and this idea of, let's get more folks doing that work themselves. This was one of the few platforms that we've seen folks at all different levels of technical capability step forward and want to use. Some of our more advanced citizen developers make deep use of the APIs. Others just use these as smart forms that are within their wheelhouse to be able to update and maintain. So we looked at about 30 contenders, everything from Process Maker to Betty Blocks to Appian to Mendix, a lot that were sort of pure play in this space. And we ended up coming back to Build. Next slide, please. A few animations here just to show some examples. I know it's a little hard to see on the screen, but the first of these is an add drop form. Again, a paper form you used to have to take to the registrar's office. Now you can sign in, enter have it pre-recognize certain fields about you, enter other information that is relevant, and then begin a workflow to run that through approvals and processing. Next animation. This is a list of some of the API integrations we have in the system, which again, we can choose which forms get access to which one of these. But this ability to give form developers and app developers access directly to sources of data has been really powerful. Next. This is a fire extinguisher check-in checklist. And I would say that probably our biggest pleasant surprise in using this has been our residence life office. We always appreciate what they do, especially after busy Thursday and Friday nights and Saturday nights around campus life. But the sheer number of tasks that our residence hall RAs and area coordinators and other staff have to do, everything from life safety to reporting on call events, they've found this just to be a great platform that they can go in, and they've built a whole suite of micro apps and forms to really power this distributed work that Res Hall folks do around campus. And I think there's one more after this one. Yes, and then some of the areas that have surprised us. This has really supplanted having to buy some sort of or build some small SaaS type applications for us. I find it interesting these days. You can get a SaaS application for your lost and found. You can get a SaaS application for campus classifieds. We've done both of these in Build. If you go to our portal and click on the classifieds, it's a list like this that are just little forms folks have filled out, uploaded photos if needed, put contact information on. Just being able to sort of have an application super glue that fits in a lot of spaces and solves a lot of problems for us has really been great. So that's in a nutshell what we've done, and we'll turn it back here to Joel and the next panelist.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Melaine, I think you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Melaine Kenyon, Daemen University. I've been here for approximately 3 years, and just before I start, I want to let Kevin know I love that term, citizen developer. That is a fantastic term and a great way to explain how folks can join and be involved in Build. For those that don't know, Daemen is located just outside of Buffalo, New York, and here we've transformed operations in several key areas. We've completely changed how we intake and use information, but we still have room for improvement. In my experience, digital transformation can be aligned under many institutional goals, but personally, in my experience, I have found great success with aligning that goal with fiscal responsibility. People may resist change, but I have not found anyone that doesn't want to save time, and I haven't found an administrator that doesn't want to save money. But either way, it still comes down to our people. We are a small staff here with a big workload. We have a homegrown portal with over 270 elements. Approximately 40 of those are forms. And the entire effort has been a core part of our automation efforts for the past several years. But code changes, systems change, and processes change. So we're always wondering, how can we support our current systems and also build for the future? So our solution has been to involve others. And in order to do that, we needed an engaging and easy to use platform. And this is one of the reasons why we chose Build. So our key parts are enabling others to build their own solutions. And in turn, we want to be able to influence their success. Next slide. So here's just a few examples. Some of these are prototypes and some of these are currently active within our Build environment right now. IT should always lead the way. So leading by example, we started first with our internal forms, and you can see there we have IT professional development, our employee of the month nomination. These were Google forms that we put into Build, and then we began working with other offices. During our implementation with Kuali, we took the opportunity to completely overhaul our PM process and move our PM forms into Build as well. And you can see from there, we also have people use Kuali to access Kuali to be able to build their own solutions. We specifically targeted employee engagement. That's what we call human resources, as well as our business affairs office. Those apps you see there, approval to enter a contract, the liquor permit form, were fillable PDFs that needed a wet signature and dropped off in the business office. These prototypes are allowing us to really transform the way that they do their work. So their work, and specifically with HR and business affairs, coordinates the culture and technology that allows them to provide new value. And in addition, it's allowing us to create a group of digital technology advocates. And I'll be able to take more questions, I believe, after we hear from Garrett.
Awesome. Thank you. We've already had some questions start to come in, but I'll read those once we're done with the intros.
Hey, Joe, let me take it from here. And for those that are waiting for the slides of our Hawaiian landscape to come up, I'm joining you from beautiful downtown Atlanta, where temperatures are actually just like home, reaching into the 80s. So thank you for joining. Welcome. I'll give you a little bit of background on not only who we are and what we do, but so the one best word I'm going to use to describe some of the conversations that we're going to have today is trying to figure out how to manage and how to work your way through chaos. And chaos is a really key word for some of us, in particular for some of the larger organizations. Hawaii, the University of Hawaii system is Hawaii's public system of higher education. We are 10 campuses across all major islands, including a Research One University, which is our University of Hawaii at Manoa campus, and 2 additional baccalaureates, plus 7 community colleges, ranging all the way from, again, about 20,000 for our R1, down to a couple of our community college campuses, which are in the 1,500 to 2,000 4-credit headcount range. The really interesting thing is we have just shy of 50,000 student headcounts on a 4-credit basis, which is the typical metric that we measure the size of our institutions with. Our FTE count is in the mid 30,000s, in particular because some of the community colleges do a lot of part-time students. But one of the things that we've seen grow quite a bit, and in particular for institutions of higher ed, is our non-credit headcount has grown significantly. In particular over the pandemic, where a lot of the federal relief funds were supporting that area, but also that's just the nature of what higher ed is becoming these days. So we're seeing a lot of change happen throughout the organization. So we're actually floating through 20 or 30,000 non-credit headcount students on a regular basis, and we're seeing that escalate significantly as we go forward. My organization is responsible for central IT within the institution, so we cover anything that touches all of our students, faculty, and staff. So central pipes and plumbing, we do internet services for the entire organization. Roughly 100,000 of our closest friends across the state. We're probably the 3rd largest ISP in the state. We also do all of the central system-wide application services that run, for example, student information systems, finance, HR, all the traditional pieces that touch all of our students, faculty, and staff across the institution. We are a highly distributed IT organization at the same time. Our central services organization represents about 40% of the headcount and investment IT across the institution. So in fact, we're not unlike a highly distributed and perhaps a corporate organization that has been assembled through mergers and acquisitions, where we have a lot of differences in and between the organizations, as you can imagine, has created a bunch of interesting, I'll use the word interesting, chaos along the way in terms of IT systems that are localized to those parts of the organization. That, in fact, is one of the main problems that we were trying to solve when we made the decision to go with Build. And actually, a bunch of years ago, we were actually one of the original participating partners in helping to craft the direction of Build as it was growing up and coming out of its initial pilot phases. One of the things that absolutely drives me, yeah, I'll go ahead and say it. It is going to be recorded, but this drives me nuts as a CIO when we have a lot of these small systems that come up out of necessity. They come up in, for those of you that are I'll say more experienced in the group, Microsoft Access, FileMaker Pro. There's a bunch of these things that you go to you go to the computer store, or you go to Best Buy, or now you go to Amazon. You can literally download these $99. You get your great database system that you can create your own forms and data and workflow in your organization. You bring in your cousin or your niece or your nephew or your uncle or your auntie to help you create this for your system. They stand it up, it gets running, and starts to collect data within your system, within your operation. You start to base some of your workflows on those systems. And oh, by the way, the student that created it graduates, the person that created it moves on. And then now you have something that central IT has to come back and say, well, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to do this? How are we going to be able to satisfy the business need that was satisfied by these systems that central IT was out of the room when these things were put together? So the need for us was to bring some measure of order to the chaos, but to really allow the smaller parts of the smaller pieces of the business functions that we could not actively both serve and support, to give us a way to provide a tool set that was both robust and enterprise in nature, but that was easy to use and that could be adopted and utilized and actually have forms and workflow created at all parts of the organization. So not necessarily requiring a developer or a programmer or some high-end IT person in every part of the organization to do the work, but to look at the folks in the line of business that could really adapt the use of the tools and make a big dent in satisfying forms, satisfying workflows. And then, of course, as we go through all through this, the pandemic hits us in 2020. Everybody has to work from home. Magically, hey, I can't get my stack of paper anymore. Now, what do I do? Having this tool in our toolkit was absolutely wonderful. I'll, like Malaine, I'll use the citizen developer thing. It was absolutely great to have the tools available to us to empower our business folks to be able to use workflow that they could create without necessarily having IT in the room, but that was operated within the constructs and within the constraints of our institution-wide single sign-on, and that in fact was run on a robust basis that didn't depend on somebody's PC sitting under the desk that was, oh, I can't get to my desk anymore, so how do I turn this on? How do I get access to it? But they could also be shared across the institution as the functions grew, as the number of applications grew, and as the uses grew over time. Post-pandemic, we are taking advantage of the fact that we have a lot of these application developers in the field now, and that have not just the familiarity, but the ability to grow with us to create more and newer versions of those same applications that they created out of necessity during the pandemic, but that really gives us the ability to address digital transformation from the bottom of the organization all the way through into our enterprise systems. We'll touch briefly on APIs in the later part of the conversation. I know Kevin showed a list of the stuff that he's doing at Davidson earlier in the conversation today. But these APIs really extend the power of the tool and the application to be able to connect to some of our enterprise systems. For the data wonks in the audience and the governance people, yes, governance has to apply. We have to be able to layer on the right access and authorizations to make this happen. But luckily, as the tool grows with us, we have the ability to address that from a security point of view, and then also from an application data governance point of view. We're actually spending a lot of time on the API side of the house right now to make sure that we can put those controls into place and not let the pure chaos reign. Although, you know, sometimes it is good to have chaos reign. You get some interesting results as long as you are able to participate in the chaos down the road. I'm going to stop babbling a little bit, but you know, as you can probably tell, we really love the experience, and we've loved the ability to grow up with Quality Build as it's matured into really an excellent tool for us to use on a system-wide basis. Yes, IT started first, but the interesting part about this is many of our citizen developers, if you will, many of our citizen developers have been able to pick it up and get going with very little intervention from my IT staff. We do continue to make resources available on a system-wide basis as best we can. But the great part of a tool like this, and the whole no-code, low-code movement these days, is to really allow empowerment and allow the business folks to get their hands on this stuff. Let me turn it back over to Joel. I know we've got a bunch of questions he wants to throw at us, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Garrett. Okay, y'all, we're going to ask a poll. So we're going to ask you to fill out a poll. And now, just in case you don't know, you can drag the little frame in your screen back and forth to be able to have the slides be bigger or the folks be bigger. But here's the poll. How are you handling forms in your institution today? Are you mostly paper, mostly PDF, mostly some kind of online specialized forms tool, or are you mostly using a big enterprise product that also has forms? So something like ServiceNow or Salesforce or Banner or something like that. Now, granted, you probably have all of these, but we're asking which one you're principally using for forms. Okay, so while you're filling that out, John Owen from Wake Forest says, better copyright the term citizen developer. I think we're all going to steal it. So let's talk about citizen development for a second. So I'm going to ask you a question. If you were explaining this to a higher ed, you're all three in IT, if you were explaining build or a forms and workflow tool to somebody in maybe the faculty or somebody in staff who doesn't have a technology background, how would you explain it to them? What is the tool? And if you'd like to go first, just raise your hand or jump in. Okay, Melaine, we'll start with you.
Okay, I raised my hand because actually I small thumbnails on my screen. We have been able to, first I would consider personally, even myself, even being in IT as a citizen developer, because I don't have a development background. So when I talk to faculty, our deans or our other offices about this product, sometimes the best way is just to show them, which is why I said IT leads the way and we provide the example. We can show them the forms that we took that were just Google Forms and how we made them into extremely simple, because most of these forms are simple, and how we were able to build simple quality forms. We were able to show them how to drag and drop, how to build their workflow, how to do, they don't really need to do the basic integrations because we take care of that for them. But we're able to really explain that this will actually help with internal approval processes. And we've had folks come out and ask us, can we please be involved in the project, simply because their offices are no longer co-located. They may be in a different building now, where they might have walked a paper form literally across the hall, and now they're across campus and they want to find a different way. I mean, I'll take any digital transformation any way I can. But we love to be able to show them the product and just demonstrate how it works and let them see the ease of use.
Makes sense. Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, I would echo that in terms of really trying to help folks experience it is a great way to do this. When we talk about it, we often talk about it in terms they're familiar with, like it's like a Qualtrics survey or it's like a Google form, but you can. The automations, the workflows, the API tie-ins, the ability for you to connect to systems of record are all what make this a better than solution. There are certainly some cases that we've said, Google Form is good enough for that. Go right ahead and do that. But anytime we check a couple of boxes of needing a more advanced solution, it ends up in Koali. I should add, by the way, since folks have enjoyed the term citizen developer, definitely not invented by me. I'm pretty sure Gardner came up with that term. But echoing Melanie, I had a very similar experience as not a developer who, over the holidays a couple of years ago when COVID was going through its changes, we had to get back from our students before like January 10th if they had been vaccinated. And we ended up having them do attestations with e-signatures in Kuali. And I did the first pass of that form over about 90 minutes the day after Christmas. And one of our developers kindly came along a couple of days later and fixed it up a bit with some API tie-ins. But knowing that, even in my role where I know the least of any one of my staff, I could do something productive was kind of cool.
Working at a software company, the idea of me checking in code to our code base fills everyone with fear and terror, but I can create quality build forms. Okay.
Let me add one more piece to that.
Do it, Garrett.
I think it'd actually be really, it actually ties some of this really well together. So we actually use the paper form thing. We use the paper form, so design your own paper form. And the thing that's super critical for us is because we've tied it to our institutional single sign-on from the start, we've created policy around the Kuali click to approve equal to a wet signature for anything internal to the organization. So we have executive policy for this purpose. And because we're requiring the sign-on to happen for any access to forms, we can actually use that to do the routing, to do the signatures, and the best way to talk about it with a person that's unfamiliar with it is to talk about it in the context of, or the equivalent of, hey, move this from paper to what you see on the screen. We can design it the same as you would design a paper form, and it no longer has to sit on a desk waiting for a pen to hit the paper. It will get lost on somebody's desk. You'll know where it is. You'll track it, and the ability to keep it and record it as a document really is the one biggest selling point. If I had to pick one, the one biggest selling point from the newcomer to build stuff.
Thank you. There's a question, doesn't having so many people building their own forms make the system unwieldy? How do you manage having what could be dozens of forms or apps? So let's talk about that for a second, sort of the difference between citizen developer and IT. Why is this a tool that IT likes versus hates, And then talk about maybe the number of apps that you have. And I know, Melaine, you've had the product less than a year. The two of you have had it longer, so you're going to have a different number of apps. Feel free to talk a little bit about that. Who wants to go first?
So I'll start out.
All right.
So we actually have well in excess of 1,000 and climbing on our system. So, it is pretty interesting. Although part of this is to really allow you to structure and stratify your apps based on who has access to what. So we do have the ability to control both groups and authorizations within build. It is actually super interesting to see and get a view into what everybody else is building in the system. So besides your favorites, which roll to the top, pretty standard portal-ish kind of behavior. It is pretty interesting to be able to see what other folks have done. Search for things that have parking as part of the application name, or something that has that might relate to your application. So we actually see the large number of the pile of stuff, if you will, as a benefit to build as we work through the application. The thing that's really good is it does get tied together with enterprise class infrastructure, so it isn't a bunch of individual pieces running all over the place. So the ability for us to tie that together with common infrastructure, including our single sign-on, is actually a really big part of this.
Okay, interesting. Just so the folks so that you know a little bit about the audience, let's go to the answer to the poll. So most of the people here, almost half, are using some kind of online specialized forms tool. A third are using mostly PDFs. That's super interesting. And then less than 10% are using mostly paper today. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Who else wants to answer that question about how do you describe build? And how do you describe it, but also why is it something that, talk about citizen developers and the difference between why IT likes it, but also individual users like it.
I can take that one.
Joel, I can grab that, but also just to wrap up where Garrett was, we don't have nearly as many forms as the Hawaii system. We have about 100. That's still been really successful for us. With that, there now are opportunities in the portal view to group them by department or division, and that's helpful. Mm-hmm. We also use a lot of enterprise group and identity data to help us with the leveraging of the system. But the other thing that we recommend to folks, you can push people into Quality Build to then take the action, or you can direct link to the form. And we have a vanity short name URL creator, go.davidson.edu. So a number of them just have a go.davidson tag, and when folks go there, it redirects them into Quality Build. Single sign-on flow works great, and then they're brought straight to their form.
So similar to Davidson, you come in through our single sign-on, you come in through our current homegrown portal, and if you are using a public form that's already created and already in play, of which we have less than 20, just getting started, you'll see those public forms. You can link to those forms, you can fill out those forms. But when you're building, you're going to see your own section. So employee engagement sees their section and can develop and test their forms before making them public. Same thing with our business affairs area. Same thing with all of our offices. We actually do use Quality to request Quality Build access. Everyone can access to do forms, but only a select number of folks can use Build. So that's where we're trying to keep things not getting too out of hand. Allowing folks to request allows us to pair that office with an IT person to be able to get them up to speed so they can take care of their own forms and their own workflow. One of the great things though within Quality, which I like from my end, especially if you do have a handful of paper forms still on your campus, is you don't need to call around and look for the status anymore. I mean, the status is in Build, the status is in your system. So you'll know if it's in process, you'll know if it's completed, and you'll know if someone has opened it or not, or if it's being sent back to you and it needs to be resubmitted.
Thank you. So we have a question from Stephen Meniscalco. Stephen asks, how often do departments come back to IT for support with their forms or a new form because they forgot how to use the product? So maybe I'll talk a little bit about change management in general. So you talked, Melaine, about a train the trainer type of approach. Talk about your change management and how often people come back because they need help.
Okay. Well, again, as we're relatively new users, we've been pairing up interested offices, the ones we've been working with an IT staff member. We also use the Quality training materials, and we have that built into our knowledge portal. So far, we haven't had people continually coming back asking for more assistance. I expect that's going to happen at some point. When that does, we'll continue to train those folks. I think one of the things that we will see that we actually have experienced is that you're working with an office, you're working with an individual, and that person leaves the institution. One of the great things with Build, though, is you're not starting at square one. You're starting kind of where you left off with that person, and then they can go through that training, and then they can continue to work on their processes and their workflow.
Thank you. Is that something either two of you want to address?
Yeah, I think Elaine's right on, and that's a huge advantage to us of this being a platform as a service. We don't worry about stray things out on someone's random domain that a former employee might have paid for on a personal credit card. We keep the apps within a platform. We keep the data within a platform, and that's been really, really positive. For us, we did a lot of training when we first rolled this out, and both building off the Quality training, we did training classes that were both sort of a demo of the system and then a chance for participants to build a live form before they left. We get some questions, I'd say particularly forms that have more complex data interactions, which is not really surprising. If you're anyone could build a form. Not everyone's going to be able from the ground up to instantly use a data integration. But we found it's pretty low impact on our IT team in terms of the ongoing questions. Once someone becomes a kind of a local resource for their department, a lot of it is self-managed. Really where we get involved is talking to them when they need those data integrations about, making sure that for their use case, it fits our data security policy, and that, they're thoughtful in terms of what they're trying to collect and why. But again, it's nice to be able to do that in a platform where we can audit and review what they're doing after the fact if needed.
Yeah, one of the actually really strong points that both Kevin and Melaine made are what happens when somebody leaves. What happens when, I've created these 5 applications and I'm out the door. So what happens next? The interesting thing for us is that because of the low threshold to figure out how to use Build, and once you know how to use Build, it's pretty easy because the toolkit transfers. It's pretty easy to go figure out what somebody else did in their application. The tool is pretty intuitive. We've actually found we've got, and I'm going to jinx my guys, but we found that we've got very little, oh, come back, I forgot how to use this, because the materials that are provided in terms of training materials as well as the user interface, the user experience is actually pretty friendly to non-technical types. So we see that the basic apps are very easy to maintain and organize, and then get back into, I did this last year. Oh, let me get back in. I want to make a change to the form. I want to add a widget here. We typically don't get those kinds of questions. As Kevin noted, though, we do get specific engagement around the API stuff, which is more complicated. We have to be a little bit careful, obviously, in terms of data governance and security. But from the baseline app forms and workflow, we have been pleasantly surprised. And again, I'm going to jinx my help desk right now. But we've been pleasantly surprised that folks have been very self-sufficient on the platform.
Thank you. We're going to go to the next question now, the next poll question. How easy is it to use the current solution you're using for forms? Very easy, online, great on mobile, somewhat easy, they're online, but maybe we do it mostly on desktop. Meh, they're okay, kind of a pain, and lots of pain. I'd rather go back to paper forms. So if you could fill that one out, and then we're going to go on to the next question. So there's another question from John Mercer. So he says, for one with no baseline knowledge of Koali, what are the main drivers for Koali versus using existing solutions like the forms and workflow components of service management tools like Freshservice, ServiceNow, when used across service departments? Apologies if you previously answered it. So what's specific about Koali Build?
Well, I don't have to, sell 7 houses of college rental property to buy a ServiceNow license. That's a plus. But in all seriousness, I mean, those are some great platforms. Salesforce is a great platform. What I've found, and we don't have we use Zendesk for customer support because it's great for the customer. We don't have a full-fledged ITSM platform. We do the stitching together within IT. But what I guess I would say is that compared to ServiceNow, you really need ServiceNow developers to do a lot of this. They talk about that being a DIY. I was at a R1 institution that was one of the first implemented about 15 years ago. And what we found was you really, yes, we were out of BMC Remedy, but you still had to send someone to the training, and they got their certification, and they were constantly staying up on it. Folks need training to use Build in an advanced way, but it's not external training. This is very much closer to the WYSIWYG Google Forms experience or Qualtrics experience than what you're going to get with one of these deeper platforms. And then the other piece is the agnosticism of integrations. So if I were doing work entirely within Salesforce for a business function, a Salesforce form might make perfect sense because it's right there, internal and audited. But in most of our institutions, we don't do all of our work in a single monolithic platform. So much work is between platforms, and we want to hide that from the student or the faculty or staff member. We don't want people going to 14 offices to change an address. They should be able to change it in one place, and we handle the flow of how that works. We already do that in other areas. So having sort of a Switzerland for forms and workflow for us that we can then do updates and systems on the back end has been really powerful.
Thank you.
Let me add a little bit to Kevin's statement. It is about I think we've settled on the user experience as really being the key to getting not just the new developers in, but to get folks to use it, in particular around forms and workflow. The workflow UX. It was, and I'll be fair, early on, when the product was just trying to get its legs under it. Early on, the workflow is pretty clunky, but with the UI that's in place now, the experience is very much WYSIWYG. It's very much drag and drop, and again, the level of intuitiveness for the customer is really where I think the differentiator is.
I'll just
Thank you very
add
much.
a little bit. As a small institution with very limited resources, we don't have a product like ServiceNow, and we don't have a specific ITSM solution. We have a ticketing system for our help desk, and everything else is homegrown, built in-house. So for us, Koali has been, what I put forward is, it's just a game changer.
Thank you. I don't know how to ask this question. I was going to ask the question about, because we have customers that are using the product that are community colleges. We have customers that are using the product like UC San Diego that are huge, or the Hawaii system that are huge. I don't know how to ask the question. Why is that? Why is the tool working for very small institutions, but also very large institutions? Anyone want to give that a try?
Sure, I'll take a first stab at that. I think, and Joel, this may sound like back patting, fair or unfair, but our team was really impressed with the team that we worked with at Koali, the build product team at the time, led by Ted Giles, who I think has moved to a more senior role within Koali. But just having kind of a culture that worked the way that our team works, very agile focused, very solutions focused, very customer focused, and user story focused. We didn't have a lot of experience with Koali as a team. We hadn't worked with Koali and other products. Knowing you all had an office out in Utah, when we had folks heading out there for our conference, we actually had them arrange to drop by the Koali office and just talk with folks, spend some time whiteboarding. We found just a really great cultural match to what we see as kind of future-looking IT vendors and IT product and service developers. So the team that was working on build, super responsive, super engaged, always have been open to our feedback. When we had feedback, that we thought were really sensitive or critical needs for the product, we've never had a hard time reaching someone and engaging with them. And we've often seen very fast turnaround on features that might be, sensitive or critical improvements to the platform. So there's just that cultural partnership of being a very easy team to work with. And I think that scales. If you're, the size of Davidson is closer to where Melane's coming from than Garrett's. We've got 35 folks in IT, so not tremendously large by any stretch of the imagination. But, we still spend enough time dealing with unresponsive vendors or partners who just don't get it, and we have to work around the solution. And we've just found culturally the Koali team that does build to be really great to work with.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, let's see the answers to the poll. So it looks like half are either meh, kind of pain, or lots of pain, and then only 31% are sort of somewhat easy, which is interesting. All right, so here's a question. This isn't really about build per se. This is about just digital transformation. We've been talking about digital transformation for decades, literally. Are you actually accomplishing it? And what does it look like for you in the future? Do you feel like you're actually accomplishing the goal of digitally transforming your enterprise, and what's left for you? And I know you could each spend an hour on this, but give us kind of a high level summary.
So maybe I'll go first, and the others can chime in. So I would say, and I think this is a fair statement, the University of Hawaii has a long way to go. I think we've made some good strides at digital transformation, and the ability to find this suitable set of tools that are available to us makes a huge difference. But I do think we have a long way to go, and part of that is culture shift. Part of that is the ability to make sure that we can bring suitable business champions to the table to make that happen. And I think that's a big part of our challenge going forward. But really having the availability of the tools, and in particular this class of tool we build, gives us, I think, a good advantage. It's not the only tool in our toolkit, and we have to have alternatives available depending on what's going on. And then the hard part is really going to be about how do we connect the dots behind the scene invisibly. So this speaks to APIs, connects the dots behind the scene so that it just happens, but happens in a way that follows all of our policies. And that's a real challenge for us. I think we're getting there, but we have a long way to go.
Thank you.
And just to follow up with what Garrett just stated, I believe there's always room for improvement. Even though we have been able to, in some ways internally with our own developers, transform several areas, not every place has gotten on board. So with a goal to streamline workflow for greater efficiency, again, just from being a small institution with very limited resources, we want to be able to make that case for that business requirement and make sure that we're bringing the culture and the technology together. If we keep those together and we have those completely interwoven, and that's what is providing us the way to bring new value to our students and also to our employees. But still, there's always room for improvement. Even professional athletes continue to practice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I think all three of us would agree this is a journey, not a destination. I think Davidson's a lot further along the digital transformation path from an internal perspective than we were a decade ago. We were, a small, very traditional college in many ways. Most of our divisions departments have gotten out of the 90s, 2000s model of technology and systems and adopted modern SaaS or on-premises systems. And with that, we've seen good business process transformation in a number of areas, and that's been really great. As I mentioned earlier, Koali has been for us sort of a super glue that helps connect things. Its reliance on and sometimes driving the creation of integrations and APIs has also been helpful in terms of furthering us down our data warehouse strategy, our integration strategy. You'll be able to report data across systems to get wisdom from that data is a huge need for many campuses. In the background, we are working on trying to go back to the monolithic in some areas with going from multiple HRIS systems to Oracle Cloud HCM and Oracle Cloud ERP. Student systems are probably a couple, 3 years down the road. So eventually some of our needs may snap back into a modern enterprise system, but that's probably a decade's journey for us. And there will always be, there's never going to be a system we own that's going to log our fire extinguisher safety checks, right? So there's always a need for some of these smart forms and solution drivers. But this provides us with kind of a plane that works with other systems and technologies to accomplish what we need.
Thank you. Okay, we are almost out of time. So one of the questions is integration. So a large percentage of the people, somebody just asked the question, what types of integrations do you have in place? Could we have drop downs in forms auto-populate with data from other systems? We have a very large percentage of our customers start off in a registrar's department or in a research department or in admissions or someplace else. And they just build and they start building apps, and pretty soon they want integrations. What does that look like? What is the difficulty in creating integrations? What's the difficulty in then using the integrations in creating your forms? And what kinds of integrations do you have?
So maybe I'll start. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sure. It's a quick answer. I'd say as long as you've got folks who have, strong integration capabilities that kind of go beyond the legacy, SFTPing files everywhere, right? You're going to need some experience with API-driven endpoints, whether you can get those through an integration platform or build your own. We learned actually Azure Functions capability and have been using that to build lightweight APIs that have helped us. It's really easy to integrate those into forms. If you're trying to stay in the campus guest house, for instance, they have a little form where you can go online and reserve a room and get it charged back against your departmental fund code. And when you launch that form, you see a little spinner where the list of department organizations or cost centers is being pulled in real time from a data source. And another one spins with the latest natural account numbers. So you can, we know you're not going to enter a wrong organization code there because you're picking from the latest and greatest. And exactly as Joel said, our registrar's office, which is pretty data savvy, has done a lot in this space with us really providing the enabling API access and then they're able to work with that from there, as has been our HR department.
So for those who aren't familiar with Build, once you create those integrations, how difficult is it to use the integrations as a form designer or designing workflows?
Forward. And we as IT have control over which integrations, which forms get. So we would trust some of our distributed folks with more sensitive data and others getting started. We don't want them accidentally to expose data or the API in ways we wouldn't want.
Yeah, to add to what Kevin's shared in his experience, that the API functions are actually pretty straightforward for API developers to use. I would almost call them easy, but easy if you already know what you're doing. Easy from the standpoint of creating those APIs. So we have existing APIs into our Banner instance, into our PeopleSoft instance. And having said that, you can already guess at what the next statement is. We have to deal with authorization and security and controls. So we, as others in this space, we also control the API access fairly heavily, in particular to make sure, especially because we have a lot of developers, a lot of build developers authorized. We do want to make sure that we don't let the gate open inadvertently, especially at this stage of development. We've got some really good take up by a lot of people on a broad basis, and we do want to make sure while the APIs are super powerful, they can also be accidentally misused from the standpoint of data access. So that's our caution when we use this. It is super easy to use. Our developers are very happy with their ability to connect other systems, including other build instances. But the trick is to make sure that that you have the governance in place up front, because it's awful hard to go back and put it in place later on.
Thank you. Okay, what should I have asked that I didn't ask?
I believe we talked
talk
about
implementation. Oh, sorry, Kevin.
Oh no, that was Melaine.
Oh, Melaine.
We talked about just insights for folks going through digital transformation, on kind of insights along the journey. As Kevin mentioned, this is not a destination. We're going to be on the journey for a long time. I had written just kind of notes to myself after knowing that is just everything takes more time than you think it's going to. Just working within your culture and working within and targeting those smaller offices, even sometimes knowing when are those smaller offices, when are they busy, and targeting them during a time where they're going to be able to focus on what you're training them and what they need to know. So my main insight was know your culture and just understand sometimes that you need patience and respect for their process as well.
That's wise insight. Thank you.
So
patience and respect.
One of the other things that's super valuable in this case is, with this class of tool, we can help empower our customers to help us drive the transformation. Right? One of the most difficult places to drive transformation, especially in a large organization, in particular in higher ed, there's a huge pushback if you just try and do it top down centrally. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that this has given us is the ability to empower customers at the grassroots level to be able to understand in their own mind, with their own business case, why this is important and why it makes a difference. And I've already found it making a difference from the standpoint of when we start to talk about, hey, can we talk about transforming the functional side of the house? Can we talk about transforming business processes? It's not, no, we don't do it like that here. Go someplace else and don't talk to me anymore. It's, okay, well, we can see how it works in some cases. We have examples that we've been able to work on ourselves. So, hey, central IT, you can come in and help us with this. It's like, we're from the federal government, we're here to help. Yeah, right. But it really is, the ability to raise all boats with tools, help the recognition happen at a grassroots level to help us with central transformation at the same time.
Yeah, I think both Melaine and Garrett made really important points there. In really getting that buy-in as you go down this journey versus oh no, IT has another thing they want us to learn how to use, makes a big difference. And we at our campus, we have what we call a sort of a campus IT partners group that brings in some of the distributed IT staff and really functional technologists or funky techs from around the campus. And we did several kind of
funky tech.
Well, that is a Davidson term. I never heard that before I came here. But the folks like the registrar's data specialist and the database specialist in HR and folks like that, we gave them a couple of road shows and really intensive demos because we knew, like Garrett said, it's distributing digital transformation, and if they were on board and they would use this, it would be successful. And as I look down the list of apps, I see a lot of things that were long-standing requests, like give me a place to change my own address, or let me do an online ad change form. But for years, these groups would come to IT and have never made the top of the ticket list, and now here they've built this themselves. Actually, I would note one of the questions in the Q&A from someone who's a CHRO or an HR director asking can your department do it on your own, or does it need to be implemented by IT? You probably could do it on your own, but this is a great partnership with IT. The IT lift is not heavy. It's getting authentication, single sign-on working. And if your IT department has some good integration capabilities, getting their partnership to expose that into the platform. This is something that can save IT time and empower divisions and do it in a good, secure enclave. So hopefully your IT folks will be on board with it. And I think it'd be smoother as a partnership than doing it by oneself.
Okay, it is time to wrap up. I just have one more quick question. Could you show the results of this poll? We asked the question, does your institution have a no-code tool it uses to create automated workflows? One of the benefits of Quality Build over other tools is not only is a no-code forms tool, but it's also a workflow tool. Talk about automation of workflow in your enterprise. And we just have a little bit of time, but why is workflow an important part of what you're doing with transformation?
So it's absolutely critical. It's critical to make sure it works. So think about the paper form with the multiple signature blocks and the sticky notes that got put on the form along the way. This is the capability you absolutely need to make workflow happen. It's not just the one form and one signature. It's the multiple signatures, back and forth, sticky notes to modify the content, and folks to sign again. So it is about having the tool to be able to make that happen. And again, I think we've got. It's not a 100% solution, but it will definitely do a lot of the stuff we needed to do.
Thank you.
And I just would completely agree with Garrett. And just to answer a little bit on that HR piece, there are some simple forms and some simple workflows HR related, and then it gets extraordinarily complex. But for something simple that can keep you busy, even if it's a changing your title form or a change of supervisor, that can be so easily done with a Quality form, especially if it needs to go through approval, for an example, through academic affairs or through another VP area. That is something that is quite simple to do that can save your office a lot of time.
Awesome. Anything you want to add on that, Kevin, before we shut it down?
I think I'm good. These have been great questions.
Yeah, they're super good questions, and there's others we didn't get a chance to get to. I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to come. We'll send out a survey, so please submit the survey. We'd love to get your information, and we'll send a follow-up email for unanswered questions. So we'll answer the rest of these questions in an email. Thanks for the time, everyone. Stephen, I'll turn it back to you.
Perfect. Yes. And actually, before I go through my closing slides, I will launch the last poll while I'm speaking. So if anyone's still here, just start answering the poll. But I'd just like to say thank you again to Kevin, Melaine, Garrett, and Joel for your time here today. And I'd also just like to take a minute to thank you, our audience, for joining us here today as well. For those of you that enjoyed our presentation today, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by us at University Business, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, as well as current issues in higher ed. We have a wide range of readers who subscribe for free to UB, and they stay up to date with us online in our newsletters and web seminars like this one. Also, if you would like to watch this web seminar again, or for those of you who believe that the solutions that were provided would be helpful to your colleagues, and I'm sure that is very much the case, you'll be pleased to know that our team at UB, we will be sending you an email at some point tomorrow, and that email will include an on-demand recording of this web seminar and a link to the slides. And I will show you the results very quickly before I log off. But just with that, on behalf of UB, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you again. This was great.